Cobra Kai, the return to the Karate Kid saga 34 years after its conception. It was a show that many had doubted, but after a very successful first and second season, there was definitely less concerns going forward. However, even with 2 great seasons to its name, Cobra Kai was still somewhat of an underdog, mainly due to its streaming platform, YouTube Premium. Thankfully, this all changed in mid-2020 when Netflix picked up the show and decided to give the series the recognition it deserved. Now, with season 3 being days away at the time of me scripting, I decided there would be no better time than to go over the first 2 seasons of Cobra Kai and rank each episode from worst to best. Before starting, there are a few things I would like to address. Firstly, this is all my opinion. I am simply a longtime fan of Cobra Kai, not some saint you have to undoubtedly agree with. In fact, I urge many of you to leave your ranking down in the comment section below. As always, I love hearing different opinions. Secondly, worst does not necessarily mean I'm referring to a bad episode. Overall, I don't believe Cobra Kai has had a bad episode as of yet, so whatever does end up on the lower end of this list is simply the worst out of the bunch to me, and not a bad episode. Finally, I'm aware that Cobra Kai is still in its early stages. The creators have confirmed the possibility of 5 or more seasons, so if this video gets enough attention, I may consider revisiting this ranking at a later date. But without further ados, let's get into it. Number 20, Moment of Truth. This episode is my scapegoat for the problems I have with Season 2. The Moment of Truth is the episode that introduces Stingray as a dojo member, as well as Tori
with a Y
for the first time. I don't think I need to explain my distaste for Stingray too much. You either like him or you don't. There is really no middle ground. The writers very much were aware of how the comedic tone the show previously had would vanish a little due to the seriousness of Season 2, which is why Stingray is a thing. But the difference is the comedy in Season 1 was by circumstance, which is why it was funny. No character was trying to be the center of comedy, and that's why it worked. That's not to say Cobra Kai Season 2 is void of circumstantial comedy, it's just now we have a character that is the embodiment of it and nothing else. Which, to me at least, is not a compelling addition to the cast or a good means to enhance the comedy. And now for Tori. Oh boy, do I have a lot to say about her. I don't like Tori, to put it in simple terms. She makes no sense, she is probably a psychopath in the making, and the only reason she exists is to give Miguel a girlfriend and to fuel conflict. So, in simple terms, she has an unnatural purpose. As much as you want to hate on Sam, she has a purpose in Cobra Kai besides being someone's girlfriend. Sure, she does become Miguel's girlfriend later on in Season 1, but far before that she had development and flaws as a character, primarily depicted through her relationship with Kyler and her family. But Tori has none of that as of yet, which topped with Stingray being an addition to the dojo really demonstrates some of the annoying problems that come from Season 2 as a whole. Even so, I do enjoy the little moment Daniel has with the Miyagi replica, as well as Johnny giving Kreese a second chance, even if, his motives are not the best. Like I said, I don't hate any episode of Cobra Kai as of yet. This episode is just okay with everything considered, taking the worst episode title for me in the series thus far. Number 19, Back in Black. Now this is not a bad episode by any means once again, it's just sorta a good episode, which by Cobra Kai standards is just not cutting it. The biggest strength this episode has going for it is its climax. It's very well done training sequence that juxtaposes the 2 karate dojos. It's fun, entertaining, well shot, and overall a great showcase of what this season will explore in terms of these dojos. The only problems I have is everything in between. In my opinion, the best episodes of Cobra Kai are those that can successfully juggle with multiple interesting plot lines, which unfortunately this episode in my opinion lacks in. Besides the home situation with Robby reaching new lows, there's nothing that strikes me as being particularly immersive or important that stems from this episode, making this, if anything, just a forgettable episode crammed into what is a show chock full of eventful moments. Still not a bad episode, just to be clear. Number 18. All In. Now, unlike my previous picks, this one probably needs more explaining, especially considering that most fans seem to hold this episode in high regards. I think All In is a good, entertaining episode that does advance the plot significantly, such as Dimitri starting the lessons at Miyagi-Do, Hawk trashing Miyagi-Do, and this really well acted confrontation at the end of the episode. But the other progressions the episode brings forth are, well, let's just say kinda dumb. For instance, this scene with Anush and Johnny is complete barnacles. I love Johnny and he's my favorite character in Cobra Kai, but this is assault. People are in the store. How did he get away with this? Like, there was literally no reason for him to do this. It just makes Johnny look incredibly stupid, which he is not. If the purpose was to flesh him out and give him flaws, well then this comes off as insignificant. Johnny was incredibly flawed to begin with in both Cobra Kai and The Karate Kid. There is no need for this irrational behavior to drill home his flaws. It sucks because this taints the discussion Johnny has with Carmen, which I would have loved if not for the very reason that caused it. The episode also single-handedly sets up Miguel and Tori as a couple, along with hinting one between Robby and Sam. The complications between these two couples and just the relationship aspect in general is not, well, it's not quite my favorite part of the season, and I blame this episode for initiating one of those. I could go on and complain with how the main conflict in this episode started over a fucking Yelp review or other pointless nitpicks, but I won't because, like I said, I don't hate any episode of Cobra Kai. It's just this one does have its fair share of parts that just personally irk me, but it is not without an abundance of good. The mall fight is great and well choreographed, the Daniel and Dimitri moment is great, and as ridiculous as the Yelp review is, I love the moments we get to see of Hawk in this episode.
He's a fucking nerd!
Number 17, Strike First. A very good follow-up to the pilot episode. Strike First, while not being as entertaining as the episode that came before, or most of what comes after, is still an overall good experience. It has some genuinely funny moments, primarily between Miguel and Johnny. While we got to see these two interact in the first episode, it's really this episode that showcases the possibility of what a great student-teacher relationship these two will have for the rest of the series. Unfortunately, Daniel's half of the episode is not nearly as interesting as what is going on with Cobra Kai. Again, that's not to say it's bad. It provides great insight into the character's change over the past 30 years, showcased brilliantly through the opening scene of the episode. Still, these early episodes really can't do much interesting or insightful things with Daniel's character since we need time to establish Johnny's dojo, which is unfortunate but a flaw that does let down this episode a bit. Number 16, Mercy Part 2. I really feel for this episode if I'm being honest. It has big expectations to live up to. Naturally, being compared to the superb first episode of Season 1 is one thing, but there's also carrying the momentum of the Season 1 finale on his shoulder, a burden that clearly led to overexertion. Look, let's break it down. The Season 1 finale brought with it several questions. What will happen to Miguel and Sam's relationship? Will Kreese be led into the dojo? Will Miguel turn into a full-blown bully? What will Johnny do to address the issues he saw at the tournament? And what will become of Robby and Johnny's relationship moving forward? And a whole slew of more questions that I don't have time to mention. The problem is, Mercy Part 2 takes it upon its shoulder to answer most, if not all, of the superb questions asked in the Season 1 finale. Now you may be asking me a question. Why is this a bad thing? Well, it makes the pacing of this episode feel faster than the time it took Miguel and Sam's relationship to shatter, and that's saying something. The point is, there's too much going on and there's no breathing room. All these questions do not need to be answered in the first episode of the season. For me at least, this episode did not excite me to eagerly watch the next as much as Season 1's episode did, because this bombarded me with answers I did not need to know immediately. The acting is also a bit off in the first episode from some actors, specifically the younger cast.
He taught us to win at all costs. He is a better man than you will ever be.
Which could simply be due to them readjusting to their roles after a long break. Even with these flaws, this is still a really good introduction to the season. While the pacing is a bit too brisk for my liking, the actual contents of the episode are still entertaining. While not as well choreographed as some of the other fights, I still very much enjoyed the Kreese versus Johnny fight. Very tactical that they started off with that, may I add. Johnny questioning his teaching is also great, especially seeing how much it backfired at the All Valley. And finally, seeing the newly created Miyagi-Do set finally being put to use was captivating, to say the least. Number 15, Escalito. Sorry if I said that wrong. Now we are at the point where all these episodes are just really solid, and there's minimal flaws I have to point out about all of them as well. Escalito is honestly just a very entertaining episode for Cobra Kai. It's chock full of some really funny scenes, especially from Miguel and Johnny.
I thought you knew this guy.
Of course not, I lied. Run!
Which, speaking of that, the training montages are also very well done, serving as the first example of Miguel learning a fundamental skill in his training: kicking. Even Daniel's part in the episode is interesting, and it got some good laughs out of me.
My mom drove me on dates, okay?
Yeah? How'd that go?
And that ending, jeez, Miguel's harsh punishment topped with Johnny's slow entrance into the change room gives me chills every time. Number 14, Low. When breaking this episode down, it's pretty similar to Back in Black in terms of structure, with a little build-up and resolution at the end, but mostly being composed of showcasing different training methods between both dojos. However, unlike Back in Black, Lull has a lot more going on with it both in and out of training scenes. For instance, both Daniel and Johnny have conflicts directly spawning from their individual training sessions. Daniel's conflict is one that emanates from outside of his training and comes from his negligence to find balance in life, which results in him losing a very important employee and his wife straying further away from him. Meanwhile, Johnny's portion is completely juxtaposed to all of this, his conflicts directly emanating from the training itself, seeing how his absence has allowed Kreese to slither deeper into the dojo and affect his students, all of which results in him, by the end of the episode, taking the right step forward and kicking out Kreese from the dojo. While Season 2 does have its flaws, the one thing it is exemplary in is constantly building and characterizing the opposition between both dojos, both literally and figuratively, a theme that is at the core of this episode and a reason why it is far more successful in its approach than Back in Black. Number 13, Glory of Love. This is the episode I would say takes the cake as being the funniest episode of Season 2. After a series of extremely tense episodes, it was by no means a bad idea to lay out a relatively calm yet funny episode before the climactic ending of the season. The opening scene is a hilarious parody of generic 80s music videos, and how can I forget about Johnny going out for Tinder dates? Need I explain more? It is as enthralling as it sounds on paper. And finally, Miguel and Johnny have some moments together in this episode, because as a whole, this season feels so void of it at times, so it's good to see them back to their old ways. Additionally, while I'm not a fan of the love drama spawning from this season, in this episode it is pretty entertaining. Pulpo is where I have my issues with, but we get there when we get there. Number 12, Cobra Kai Never Dies. Up until this point in the video, I've tried my best to not gush over Johnny Lawrence because, like I've said, he is by far my favorite character in the show, but I do not want that to let me stray away from the topics at hand. However, I am going to drop that restraint for this episode discussion because the reason I love it so much is because it is a great Johnny episode first and foremost. Up until this point, the show had done a great job to get the audience inside the head of Johnny Lawrence and care for him, most prominently through Ace Degenerate. But for me, this episode is what raised that sympathy to a whole new level. The episode demonstrates how much Johnny has messed up in life. His son's life is going to waste, his wife is given up on him, and he's back to square one due to him not being allowed to train Miguel. It truly is heartbreaking to see how much Johnny's life has changed for the worst. But that is until perhaps one of my favorite scenes in the show rears its head. I'm of course talking about the restaurant scene which precedes to Johnny's speech to Miguel's mom. It truly is a testament to how great of an actor William Zabka is, and the opening portion where Johnny just looks on at a father and son enjoying a meal together is enough to make my eyes water, and then his speech comes along and places a wide grin of relief on my face. I love this episode so much for its ability to tell a compelling mini story on Johnny Lawrence. So why is it so low? I hate bringing up the same point because it feels like I'm beating a dead horse, but Daniel Larusso. I'm sorry to say, but Daniel's conflict with Tom Cole is not nearly as interesting or progressive as what Johnny goes through in this episode, and that's basically the only thing stopping this episode from being even higher on the list for me. Number 11, Pulpo. I will be honest, I don't know how I feel about this episode. On one hand, I really love it for some of the interactions it brings forth, but at the same time it gives me a bad feeling of deja vu. Thus, it is only fitting to rave about this episode and also shit on it at the same time. Firstly, it's always nice to see Johnny and Daniel interacting on good terms together, especially in this double date scenario, and if this episode has done anything, It has convinced me that Miguel's mom and Johnny are the only valid couple at this point, at least until I see what goes on with Allie in season 3 or whenever she comes in. Meanwhile, while the kids' party is very stupid in certain regards, it does have its moments. As silly as it is, I actually love the Dimitri and Hawk moments in this episode. It's genuinely sad though to see what karate has done to these two, more specifically Hawk, but it is equally as funny what Dimitri does to Hawk at the end of the episode.
And he bawled like a baby when Dobby died.
Now, a flaw I have with this episode, it's just too identical to season 1 episode 9, different but same. Let me break it down. Johnny and Daniel get closer together in some way, but Robby finds a way to ruin it. The kids also have an event that occurs resulting in the whole relationship dynamic changing. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, because this episode does the exact same thing. It really makes it seem like the show is running out of ideas, which is not true, but this formatting is a little too similar for my liking. And it does not help that Different But Same executes the ideas much better for its season finale as well, which I will get into later. And the kiss between Miguel and Sam is just a bit too soap opera-y for my liking. And it's because of this and the resulting episode that I can understand why people hate Sam. But I gotta give credit where credit is due. Whoever directed this episode, I want to give you a gold star for showcasing Tori behind a triangle window after that kiss. All of that just to showcase a literal love triangle forming. Beautiful. Number 10, Quiver. Counterbalance, or episode 5 of season 1, was amazing, eventually leading to each episode preceding it to showcase a similar level of god-tier quality, with episode 6, Quiver, being the first of the aforementioned. Seeing the Cobra Kai dojo's population increase significantly was funny as much as it was fascinating. Johnny, of course, not being used to teaching such a big class naturally leads to his teaching methods being the cause for most of the new students to leave. But seeing him overcome it demonstrates growth within our lovable main character. And let's not forget that this episode graced us with none other than the Hawk. This is also the part where Daniel's portion of the episodes not only becomes more interesting, but more important as well. His resurgence into karate eventually leads to the formation of a new student-teacher relationship, later given the opportunity to blossom over the course of the season and beyond. Number 9, Ace Degenerate, the episode that started it all for this wonderful series. While I do not believe Ace Degenerate is the best episode of the series, I certainly believe it is still a phenomenal first episode and an amazing character study on Johnny Lawrence. Everything in this episode is from the perspective of Johnny, which is important because we need to understand him to want to continue watching the series. And this episode does an amazing job at doing exactly that. So many good moments of character are revealed all throughout in the episode. For instance, Johnny choosing not to help Miguel until his car gets involved, the constant distaste presented whenever Daniel is brought up, and my favorite of all, his car ride full of reminiscing. I love this scene so much, and it certainly holds up as one of my favorite scenes from the entire show. Just seeing Johnny ride around half drunk in his car, playing 80s music, doing nothing but reminiscing is amusing as much as it is insightful. As much as it's played for laughs in the rest of the series, Johnny is a character who is literally stuck in the 80s, back when he had some form of stability, or as ironic as this word is, balance. Such a small scene does so much to showcase this important character trait he has of losing touch with reality for far too long. What this small episode does is successfully get us in the mindset of Johnny Lawrence and actually make us start caring for the bully who went wrong in life. And for that much, this episode is placed as highly as it is. While on the topic of understanding Johnny Lawrence, at number 8 we have Molting. I think it's only fitting to start this segment by discussing the scene where Johnny has a talk with Miguel. It's funny because when Johnny explains his side of the story, this part really draws comparisons to that one famous video discussing why Daniel is the real bully. But let's be honest, everyone knows about it at this point. The explanation is honestly cute, and I don't think it should be slammed as being an attempt to paint Johnny as the good guy all along. That would be discrediting the writers immensely. It simply gives much needed context on Johnny's understanding of the situation, even if flawed, allowing the audience to determine where their loyalty lies themselves. The episode also serves as a major turning point in the series for Johnny's character. Through the speech given on moving past your previous failures, Johnny finally takes the last step in fixing his life. Yes, you heard me. the last. At least from my point of view, Johnny had always been slowly developing to getting his life back in order the moment he met Miguel. All he needed was the right motivation to physically start fixing his life. Even on the Daniel side of things, the episode is amazing, showcasing some really nostalgic Karate Kid-like training montages. And you can't really talk about this episode without mentioning that fiery ending. I'm sorry, I could not resist. But in all seriousness, I love the final few seconds of this episode. Of course, the final thing Johnny needs to do to fully set his life back on track gets disturbed by fate, aka the writers. Number 7, All Valley. This was honestly extremely close to losing out the number 7 spot to Molting. Both episodes that follow back to back are amazing in their own right, but even though All Valley might have less going on, the less that it shows just comes off as being more interesting. At least to me. The date, but not a date, that Miguel and Sam have was an amazing throwback in so many ways to the original Karate Kid, and it is very funny to believe that Miguel actually managed to use Johnny's Cobra Kai advice to land the date. Respectively, might I add. So yeah, Cobra Kai does have some lessons that translate well without aggression or violence, you Miyagi-Do fans. Also, Johnny's segment in this episode just has a lot of good moments to it like usual. If anything, the speech Johnny gives at the committee meeting just demonstrates once again how great of an actor William Zabka is.
Cobra Kai is making a difference in these kids' lives. And honestly, they're making a difference in mine as well.
And also, when I first watched this series, it really made me wonder why the hell Ralph Macchio agreed to this show. Because at every turn in this season, it just seems like Daniel comes off as being a dick for no reason. This episode included. Number 6, Fire and Ice. This is by far the most underrated episode in Cobra Kai. Firstly, let's please talk about how much iconic shit this brought to the table. Johnny learning about the internet is one thing, but oh boy, that commercial scene.
Put one of those hash browns at the end, like hash brown team Cobra Kai or something. And then send it to the internet!
But the main reason I love this episode so much is because of Johnny's discussion at the restaurant. Big surprise. Look, I love this moment, okay? It makes me tear up almost every single time because that is how good of an actor William Zabka is, and I'm going to keep saying it because he is underrated just like this episode. But what the speech does is it finally provides some reassurance to the audience on the relationship between Miguel and Johnny, because that was becoming a tad bit concerning with the recent events that have been conspiring. And finally, the All Valley itself was pretty cool, not gonna lie, even the Miyagi-Do section. See, I'm not a hater, please don't kill me. And the final cut to the ice being melted is a great image that nails home the edge Cobra Kai has as a dojo in that current moment. Number 5, No Mercy. Now this one might upset a few people, considering this is by far the most popular episode in the series. I have a bit of explaining to do, I guess. This episode is honestly amazing and it is top 5 for a reason, but unlike the 4 episodes above it, it has some serious flaws that hold it back from the number 1 spot, which I might as well address to get it out of the way. First of all, I will say it again, but I don't like the setup for the school fight. The tension between the dojos had been brewing from practically the very start of this season. There could have been so many more nuanced ways they developed the plot points that initiated this all-out brawl, but making it because of a cheap kiss that came out of left field comes off as a little bizarre and takes away from this fight a little. Also, this has been mentioned and held against the episode, but why is the school so dumb? Like, okay, look, I can sort of get behind why the teachers don't want to stop this brawl. But the thing I want to question is why did class just suddenly end after Tori made an announcement? Like they had only been in class for 2 minutes and then as soon as the PA came on, everyone's like, oh, time to go. Like this is a part where I would ask, where are the teachers and why are they not doing their job? But I digress. Aside from a few hiccups in its context and setup, the episode itself is amazing. I mean, it's number 5 for a reason, and it's about time I explain why. The fight choreography is just superb. I thought Season 1's fight choreography for the ending was very good, but this, I'm sorry, this just blows that out of the water. And this long shot they managed to do is absolutely amazing, and as much as I don't like Stingray, I gotta give credit and say that the scene works with him and I genuinely find him funny here. The actual matchups themselves are also very interesting. Of course, we get a fight between each of the major contenders. Robby versus Miguel, Sam versus Tori, Dimitri versus Hawk, all of which are equally amazing. What came as most surprising from all this was how interesting some of the other mini fights were, such as Mitch versus Chris and Nathaniel versus Bert. Although I don't enjoy the latter because it is well performed or choreographed, just the idea of it and the fact that this is the only fight stopped by a teacher is kind of funny. But this section is getting long enough, and let's talk about why this episode is so high on the list. You all know it, I know it. Miguel's fall is a brilliant storytelling choice, along with the overall consequences that stem from this fight. I may have not loved season 2 as much as the first, but I can definitely appreciate what the ending of this episode paints for the series going forward, and I for one can't wait to see what season 3 will follow with. Number 4, Counterbalance. This marked a turning point in the season, like I previously mentioned. Counterbalance is amazing for so many more reasons than just providing resolution in a conflict that kickstarted the whole show. Yes, the fight is amazing, but that is only one important part of an episode that is full of much more. First of all, this episode introduces Aisha to the Cobra Kai dojo, making her the second member, and oh boy, does she get one badass of an entrance. And while on the topic of her entrance, I love this line by Johnny showing his disgust at cyberbullying.
A bunch of pussies. Back in my day, if you wanted to tease someone, you did it to their face. There was honor, respect.
It's such a brilliant showcase of his ideologies as well as being a hilarious contradiction. We also get a showcase of Daniel's dickery again, but at the same time, another example of why Amanda Larusso is such an important part in the series. Like seriously, never before has someone playing the voice of reasoning been so likable, and that's just a testament to the writers and the actress's ability. Finally, the scene where Daniel visits Miyagi's grave is amazing. Almost made me tear up, and it is the beginning of his character finally being able to have a greater influential purpose in the show. And that, folks, is why this episode is amazing. But yeah, the fight is hella lit, not gonna lie, and seeing Miguel finally hold his own against the bullies is a big highlight in the series. Number 3, Take a Right. Take a Right is such a special episode in the series, mainly because it is so spontaneous. Most things in the series so far have been built up, foreshadowed, so when the event occurs, it feels as if it was a part of one continuous motion. Take a Right is nothing like this. It comes out of right field and is never really foreshadowed unless you count Johnny's little line where he says,
I think my buddy Tommy got brain damage because of that fight.
But regardless, it is something that does not need build-up or proper foreshadowing. It comes off as such a pleasant surprise seeing Johnny's old friends again, and it is easily why this episode is as high as it is. It is an amazing yet simple showcase of one of Cobra Kai's most important themes, the battle with time. Johnny has lost a lot to time, but he still has a lot of it left, unlike his friend Tommy, who is unfortunately fresh out of it. It is commendable for how this episode manages to be a depressing send-off for an old friend, yet also be a lesson to not take time for granted. Little details such as Tommy being put in the body bag really nail home the attention to detail this episode possesses, as dark as that imagery is. It really is a masterclass in storytelling, character, but most importantly, emotion. The only thing I wish this episode did was less. I wish this episode did not have a B-plot. I really think just making the entire episode on Johnny and his friends, potentially even getting Dutch back, would have easily made this the best episode in the series. Very much like how Zuko alone is one of the best episodes in Avatar because of its ability to focus all of its attention on one character. But I do understand the show had certain restrictions with episode count and such. If they did just make this a one-off episode with Johnny and gang, it would have simply been a case of making an amazing episode a masterpiece. Number 2, Different but Same. So on the topic of comparisons to other amazing episodes in other series, Different but Same to a certain extent is the Ozymandias of Cobra Kai. Now look, by no means am I saying that this episode reaches the levels that amazing episode does. But the beauty in both episodes is that everything falls apart. But what this episode also does is it parallels the original movie exceptionally. The first of the two major revelations is just a repetition of history, if you will. The Cobra Kai star student makes irrational judgments against the Miyagi-Do student, resulting in the girl they love growing distasteful towards them. But what is so beautiful about the repetition of history is the circumstance that has led to it. Let's be honest, when most of us watched that beach scene for the first time in Karate Kid, we were probably rooting for Daniel. being ignorant to Johnny's perspective. Now, we have a moment that is exactly the same, but this time we are completely aware of the aggressor's point of view. This is a betrayal on the audience's expectations through familiarity. But if this was not enough, there is the ending of this episode, which before I can get to that, I need to discuss an earlier portion in the episode. Johnny and Daniel finally sorta getting along. The means in which we got to this point was utterly genius. If you break it down for a second, every major problem that arises in this episode is a direct byproduct of the accident in the first episode. This is amazing and continuous storytelling, and I can't emphasize that enough. But back to Johnny and Daniel. This was the first time we get to see them actually not hating each other whilst in the same setting. The bar scene on its own is amazing, and seeing them agree on minuscule things such as Allie's husband looking like a douche is so cool. And this episode certainly takes the time to rub in how amazing this actually is. So much so that when they enter Daniel's dojo and we see Robby there, we are shocked as an audience to see what will go down before it even happens. And what does go down is incredible and gives me chills every time. Different but Same is a monster in storytelling, understanding how to play with the expectations of the audience even while being predictable. And besides being the first of Johnny and Daniel's good interactions, there is a reason why this episode works so much better than Popo. Like I said, Different but Same has a genius build-up planned from the very start of the season, and the conflict that breaks the camel's back is also one that the audience was fearful of for some time. Popo does not do either of the two things I mentioned, and its big hurrah at the end is just a cheap method to toy with the audience's emotions. I hope it is clear why this episode is second on the list, but there is still one episode that I believe is slightly better than this amazing one. Number 1, Mercy. This was hard. Both number 2 and number 1 were so close in quality that honestly, either one could take the title of best episode. But as you can tell, Mercy won out this time, so I better get to explaining. The final battle in the tournament between Miguel and Robby is exceptional. There is so much depth behind this battle. There's forgiveness on Miyagi-Do's side and regret on Cobra Kai's side. Through the actions of Hawk, Miguel, and even Aisha to a certain degree, Johnny finally is put in a position where he has to face the reality of the monsters he created within these good-hearted children. And to be fair, this match is also extremely unpredictable because the writers really know their shit, and this shows the most during this episode. Miguel has been going through somewhat of a downward spiral, where Robby has been doing the exact opposite and moving his life in a better direction. While watching this episode, I truly did not know who was going to win, but what's even more impressive is that I did not know who to root for at points. Of course, I was with Miguel the most, and I knew he was a good person deep down, so my heart told me to stick with him through thick and thin. But I can't really fault those who supported Robby, which is what the Season 2 finale did not have. Sure, it was much better choreographed and the consequences were phenomenal, but there was nothing as painful as me as an audience member not knowing who to root for, especially considering how much I loved Miguel's character. Ultimately, however, Miguel does win the fight, but it feels far from it. Johnny's reaction to this is exactly how I felt. No words, just a look of disappointment. Was it even worth getting here for the way Cobra Kai won? Johnny is stuck in a position where he has nothing but questions about if he was wrong in all of this. And once again, William Zabka does an exceptional job at showcasing this with no words, may I add. The episode is also fucking amazing besides its mindfuckery of a final fight. I still love Johnny's speech he gives to his students before the tournament, as well as the other clever throwbacks to the original Karate Kid. And I mean, it's a tournament, guys. That means it is chock full of amazing fights, so how would I not love that aspect too? But easily the final thing that gives this episode the edge of the number 1 spot is that reveal at the end. I watched this final episode at 3:30 in the morning for the first time, and my jaw was wide open with dismay. So much is offered in this episode, and to be fair, I don't even know if a Cobra Kai Season 3 episode will be able to surpass this, but I stay optimistic nonetheless. And that is all, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. Like I've said before, this video is entirely my opinion, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, on a side note, sorry if some things seemed off in this final product. Between scripting, recording, and editing, I did all of this in about 6 to 7 days. Yeah, I procrastinate a lot on this, but if this video gets enough attention, I would love to make a better and proper sequel to it one day with all the Cobra Kai episodes, whenever this masterpiece of a show finishes, that is. Either way, I hope you will stick around for the journey on this channel, and until next time.